1 century ago, not so many generations ago, for us at least, a human appeared above our home. At the time, we were only beginning to explore the trappings of gunpowder and explosives. Guns were a long way off. Beast-drawn carts were still in widespread use, and we were only barely understanding the basic concepts of mass production on very small scales. The biggest industry, if you could even call it that, were the glass-blowing villages that produced a ceremonial glass goblet. Entire families earning their livings creating these things. They were used a lot in rituals for the church and whatnot, but mostly for what humans called birthdays. Simple enough. We didn't have much of an existence, but it was a peaceful one. We had, by that point at least, explored and conquered most of our world's landmass. We were at the point where entire cities were starting to be planned out in faraway lands, waiting for new entrepreneurs to make the journey and make their mark. Imagine our shock, horror, and all other emotions when outside one of our national capitals a human ship appears. It didn't take us long to notice, you know. Giant bugger-off ship that's a mile long suddenly appears in the skies of your homeworld. Not exactly a thing you can easily miss after all. One moment it was a bright sunny day with crisp breeze and gentle fall tides. Next thing you know, half the city is in a state of panic as a large starship appears in orbit. It warped in relatively close as well, close enough we could actually see its array of cannons and weapons. At first it didn't do anything but move over different spots around the planet, hovering over cities and just sitting there staring at us. We, of course, were in a full state of panic. We had no idea what it was, what to do about it, or anything. We knew nothing. We were still early in the stages of exploring our local star system. The telescope, as a dedicated means to search the stars, was still in its infancy in terms of technology, after all. The few telescopes we had at that point weren't exactly top of the line. The few that could see it were making us nervous. Although we only recently figured out what cannons could be, we definitely knew the concept enough to register just how heavily armed that thing was. By modern standards, it would be classed as a heavy battlecruiser. It hovered around us for about a month. One long month of panic as it slowly strove its way around our pale green skies and blue clouds. Every time it came to a halt, we felt a presence, as if we were being watched. And as it turned out, we were being watched. By one man, Julius Marcus Caesar, callsign Boss Roma. One of the human so-called corsairs. A strange breed of creature, to be certain. I'm fairly certain by now you know about them, don't you? I shall assume you do. Every time he would stop that ship, he would conduct scans and observations. He was tracing our history, learning our language, and scanning the planet for any information. We, just like all of you, assumed planning for attack or invasion. Assembling a militia took us time, but we did eventually create a sizable armed force. We, of course, couldn't actually do anything about that because what use is a halberd or broadsword against a starship with asteroid-killing guns? None, that's what. So imagine our pure terror when the ship started coming a lot closer than we felt comfortable with. One day it started to land. This horrendously scary, heavily armed, impossibly armored behemoth of a starship hovered in place for a moment, then began to drop as if it had sprung a leak and was sinking. A mile-long, multi-million-ton monster suddenly drops from the sky and gently plops itself on a pasture on the outskirts of a large town. What exactly do you do about that when your only response is sword and shield? Nothing, that's what. Sweet sod all nothing with dumplings on top. Town response at first was to panic, run, hide, and call militia. The few soldiers we did have lacked the fortitude of traditional knights and soiled themselves at the first sight of those main cannons. The sheer size alone was beyond daunting. At that point, what kind of crazed madman would ever dare to even approach? If it wasn't the fact it was so prominently sized, the sound of its engines alone would have been enough to terrify all who heard it. I have never heard such a noise before. 400 human years have I been alive. The terrifying low grumble of those engines still makes me shudder. I still have no clue what convinced this human that we were his port of call. He had millions of other planets to choose from. So why us? In total, at least according to the scan data he gave us, we numbered barely 30 million globally. Why us? We still do not know to this day. Let's say we've been too busy to ask. That ship landed and stayed with no activity for about an hour or so. Fuzzy on the details, it was ages ago. But eventually the ship's ramp released and lowered to the ground. The strange few brave enough to step outside and look were mystified. No invading army, no grand conquest of arms, no death machines. Just some dude with a sign and a folding table. We were very much shocked, of course, to see a human. A genuinely non-Sarandi entity, to be certain, but still. After all that, it was just one person and a table. He came down the ramp, set up his table and sign, then returned up, making several more trips to procure various items. By the time we realized he wasn't exactly a viable threat, he had set up what can only be described as a recruitment desk on the grass under his ship. A large table, a chair on which he sat, a large sign, pamphlets and literature in a box, and a clipboard with a pen. Most curiously, however, was a small orb that we now know as a drone hovered nearby. Once he was done, he just sat there reading a publication of some kind. The sign itself read, "Employees wanted, now hiring," in perfect Sarandi text. It was a fancy font, but anyone with a basic education could read it. It was ages before someone, me, decided to step forward and find what was going on. I had no idea I'd been standing there watching him, and to this day I can't say I remember actually moving from that spot. I don't even remember leaving my house, yet here I was with strangers whisper shouting at me to run away. I was in some kind of odd trance, and by the time I noticed where I was, it was too late to panic. He lowered his publication, a newspaper as he called it, and glared at me. He stared at me for a few more seconds and neatly folded it up. He put it down, looked up at me, and smiled. "Yo, need something?" he said with a strange voice. He spoke perfect Sarandi, no less, but the tongue clicking was slightly off. It gave him an accent. I do not know. What are you?" I asked. "Just call me Boss Roma. I own this fine vessel and the mining operation from which she was born. Gorgeous, ain't she? So here to gawk at my ship, or you here to actually get a job?" He replied with a stiff but still pleasant smile. I would gladly do that, but I have no idea what exactly is going on. Can you enlighten me, please?" I asked as politely as I could while trying desperately not to trip over my own 4 feet. "I am an employer, company owner of a large organization. This organization builds these," he said, pointing one of his 5 digits at the ship above us. "And I am in serious need of a stable workforce. You work for me in building these things, I pay you. This includes full insurance coverage, benefits, medical coverage, and retirement funds. In short, my offer to you or anyone here is gainful employment," he said, smacking his lips at the last word. "But I know nothing of that thing up there. What would I do about it? I have no idea how to build a horse and cart, let alone one of those," I meekly replied. "As your employer, I am legally required to train you for the job you intend to take. No matter what that job is. Want to work at the smelters? I'll train you how. Want to be a navigations officer, cargo officer, construction supervisor? I'm legally required to give you training on how to do the job. I supply both the knowledge and the wisdom to use it. You'll have to pass orientation first, but it's only a month's worth of sitting around watching TV, so it ain't bad," he said with a strange smirk. I said nothing and took one of the papers. Orientation pamphlets, as it turned out. It effectively explained that so long as I worked for his company, I would be cared for. I would have a place to lay my head, free food while I work, and full medical coverage for my immediate family. Of course, understanding this as a medieval smith's apprentice wasn't exactly something that I could do alone. I spent the next 2 hours asking questions. He was strangely patient and answered every query I had. At the end of the talk, I had no idea what to do. I read the pamphlet and checked a few things. Eventually, I settled on something I found very interesting. I was, after all, a blacksmith's apprentice, so naturally my eyes wandered to the job title of smeltery technician. What is this smeltery technician job exactly? What does one do in this job? I asked, pointing to the picture of a large pile of metal ingots. Smeltery technician is exactly what it says. You'll be in charge of a large array of heavy smelters, alloying machinery and pouring mechanisms for casting machines, forging equipment and ore smelting stuff. Essentially, it's the job of a blacksmith, only really, really big. Like really big, he replied. Alloying. What is alloying? I asked. You know how to make steel. It's the same thing, only you use 2 lesser metals to make one stronger, better metal. Tin and copper, for example, can be smelted together to make a material called bronze. Another material called brass is used to make ammunition casings for these very same guns, he said, pointing to one of the turrets on his ship. Really? Tin and copper together? Might I beg a kindness from you, perhaps? I asked, all too eager. He said nothing and simply handed me a book. Basic Alloying Practices, Bronze Age to Information Age, Materials and Processing Techniques. Again, perfectly translated into my own language. I was shivering with excitement as I read the first page, learning the varying uses for this bronze material. You don't have bronze, seriously? He asked, seemingly confused. We had iron and steel from the start, really. Had it for millennia. Sort of never needed anything else, I guess. Iron and steel are good materials and relatively cheap. This bronze and brass stuff might change that, though. Tin and copper, why didn't we think of that? I idly said. So anyway, want the job? He asked. The job, I replied, confused, still in a daze. Smeltery tech, want it. Positions open. He said. I still have no idea what came over me. I don't know how. I don't know why. But I said yes. I signed a contract. After handing the book to my forge master, I spent the afternoon explaining to my family what was going on. They weren't exactly happy about it, to say the least, but I signed a contract, so I didn't exactly have a choice. At least that's what I thought at the time. Turns out I had every choice in the universe. At sunset, myself and 6 others who apparently had the same reaction approached the ship and entered. The next 6 months were something entirely unimaginable, especially for one like me. Imagine someone who had barely left the borders of their own home village, suddenly taken into space and shown the business end of a blue gas giant. How exactly do I explain going from smelting nails and getting yelled at for using too much coal, to slowly learning the history of a galaxy-spanning species while being taught how to smelt 20,000 tons of metal in a day? How do I really explain the sheer, what was it the human called it? Culture shock. Yeah, that's it. To know there was so much in the universe, my first few weeks were sleepless study and profuse vomiting, not from the food but from the sheer shock and awe. But I moved fast. I learned fast. All of us were under the impression we had no choice. We did, of course, as all others did. It took all of us time to understand that we could have left any time we wanted to, and he would have allowed it. It was in the contract. In plain writing, not legal jargon or fine printed scribbling. I spent 4 months up there learning how to, well, be a spacefaring technician. I was allowed to learn far beyond my job as well, just like all the others. It was a lot of information to go through in a short time. The humans seemed unfazed, of course, but we soldiered on, I believe is the... Why do humans have so many phrases and sayings? It's frightening. Very silly. In any case, we soldiered on, and I will always remember my first paycheck. It wasn't in his race's credits or Stellarite coins. It was in Sarandi Imperial coinage. 200 taels of it, freshly and legally minted. This was the equivalent of 2 years' wages for me. It was here, standing on the main hangar of his ship, shuttle ready to go, we were given the choice. He stood over us like an emperor in his own right. So here you are. Your internship is done. You've learned all you need to. The rest is up to you. After a month of orientation, 3 months of work, here's your payment. No idea how much this is worth to you guys, but I hope it covers your costs, he said. He then handed us a satchel, inside which was neatly and deftly stacked 200 taels each. The equivalent of nearly 2 kilograms of gold. We all collectively pooped ourselves. Again, 4 months' worth of work, most of which was just the simple act of sitting in a comfy chair and reading, one of my favorite activities. And we got paid more than 2 years' worth of wages? I was more than just rich, even by our standards. My family could live comfortably on this 1 sack of coins for 20 years. This can't be real, I said. Oh, but it is. Know what's the best part? Workers' rights entitles you to choose whether you want to keep the job or leave the job. Either way, though, you've earned a vacation. Time to go home. Get in, he replied with a smile and ushered us into the dropship nearby. The trip home was surreal. A part of me did this as a personal sacrifice. I never thought I'd be going home. I was ordered by my own father to placate this creature and do what he asks. We all looked at each other. We all had the same idea. It was either this or he'd wipe out the whole village. It wasn't. It was just a job. Simple employment. And judging the size and complexity of the facilities I worked in, he had space for thousands of workers. I won't go into too great an amount of detail, but after we landed in that same field, nobody expected to see my face again. I went home first thing, ignoring the crowd. My mother screamed and cried as we embraced after 4 months apart, and my father likewise lost his cool. He lost his cool even more than that when I dropped the satchel on the dinner table, and a flood of coinage came out all over the floor. Father's heart almost stopped. After placating them, I was made to explain everything, down to the most minuscule of detail. What happened after was an even further blur of activity. A month later, he reappeared again and landed in that same space. After seeing the unimaginable wealth available to only 6 of us, hundreds of others were there. After a short time, I was back up in space, on a space station, orbiting a gas giant, processing metals and ingots while reading on human galactic history. It was during this period, however, that I learned a strange pattern. This wasn't the first time a human did this. It wasn't even the 2nd, 5th, or 20th. This had been done hundreds of times before. A human, desperate for a workforce, would show up, scan a planet, learn everything he could, and then land on that planet looking for employees. Humans would go far out of their way to cater to these employees' needs, even going so far as to jeopardize their ships to accomplish it. But then I noticed a more disturbing pattern. Humans were not the dominant race in the galaxy. In fact, they had been outnumbered 100 to 1 on the galactic scale. And yet they controlled everything. Shipping lanes, security, economy, politics. Hell, every ship that currently existed in the galaxy was a ship designed by humans. No other race had any other ship designs, so every ship that existed was a human ship. Technically, even if it was built by aliens. I had no real idea of what to make of this, so I did the only sensible thing. I asked. I went into Julius's office and asked. He just chuckled. It's how we do things. It's a simple process, too. We go to a random planet with life on it and offer employment to the locals. The locals then spread that knowledge to the other locals, and slowly the culture changes. I get what I want, a workforce, and you get what you want. An industrial revolution that makes life that much easier. Surely there is friction. Surely it can't be that smooth. What about some of these things in history books? Religious cults, doctrinal wars, and other such? Do you have anything to say about that? I asked. Not really. 10,000 years of peace. Been ages since I last heard of even a regional conflict. Been even longer than that since I last heard of any serious issues. We're the ones in command, yeah, but nobody really seems to care. He replied with a smirk. So, what do you think is the cause? How are you able to dominate the entire galaxy so easily with almost no force? And why do you always need workers? Why are there so few humans? I asked, again still trying to make sense of it. Well, the short answer is most humans go to the big brain, upload themselves into the ether and ascend beyond the physical body to explore other universes and challenge the gods for their right to rule. Or something. That's why there are so few of us. We figured a way out of this whole life thing ages ago. The reason guys like me are here is because the universe is still there and we have a lot to explore. Immortality has its benefits after all, so might as well. Sadly, automation has its justified restrictions, so I have to have a full workforce to do the work. He said. Whoa, wait, humans ascended to godhood, I exclaimed. Well, yeah, wouldn't call it godhood per se, but hey, we did. Most of us choose that route when we hit 21. Guys like me, though, universe is big, really big, so we just go along with it. And as for your question about resistance, we never get any, he said. Why not? I asked. Well, I never really thought about it, but I guess it all comes down to what you can do. See, I'm up here, you're down there. I'm in a spaceship. You're in wood huts and stone castles. I'm exploring the universe and you ain't. I think that's it. And as for ideologies and religions and stuff, well, people usually grow out of that shit when they realize that working hard makes them rich and sacrificing kittens to their gods doesn't work anymore when you can just build a greenhouse and grow your own. Eventually, people just notice how good things get and how good they can only get from there, and they just I don't know, go with it, he said, rolling a cigar. So people just go with it. Just like that. Yep. It's basically how you solve all the world's problems. Poverty, food shortage, hunger, crime. You solve any problem with gainful employment. More results for less work always helps. Back in the day, 60-hour work weeks and buried in debt. Wasn't a good time. We made changes. Now we have up to 10-hour work weeks, 3-day weekends, and, well, look what we accomplished. Had more time and energy to solve real problems. Now we're sort of gods and stuff. Or something. Yeah, that's how we did it. Makes sense, he said. So let me get this straight. You control the galaxy via the means of gainful employment, and everyone just goes with it because it's easier. Nobody questions it. I asked. Well, why would you? Wealth beyond anything you've seen, an abundance of resources, more leisure time, higher survival rate, longer lifetimes due to medicines and stuff. We take care of our workforce. Hell, I'm even down in the forges myself when you were out with the flu last week. So, yeah, it's a clear line. I show people what works and what doesn't, and eventually they just do what works and avoid what doesn't. Haven't had any issues after the last 2,000 years, so obviously something's working, he said. So, you are what works, and everything else is what doesn't. That's how you rationalize this? I asked. Pretty much. I have the universe at my fingertips. You all are pooping in buckets and throwing it into the street. I'm up here, you are down there. Clearly something here works and something doesn't. Not to say I'm the bad guy here, but a lot of you bring your traditions and culture with you, and it all mixes in. Hard work gets rewarded, and therefore you get greater emphasis on hard work. It all winds up into its own self, really. Like a self-weaving tapestry. I usually just show up and open the door. The rest of you just filter in and fill the space. If it works, it works. Yeah, he said and took a good puff of his cigar. But why do you do this in the first place? Uplifting entire civilizations can't be all that cheap, I said. I do it because I feel like it. Besides, seeing people live longer, healthier lives. Hey, isn't that by itself worth the price? He said. I simply took a deep breath and resumed my day. This is the secret to how humanity conquered the entire galaxy without ever firing a shot. Dominance and complete unquestioned control, all by the simple process of offering a better life. That's how they did it. They changed entire cultures, uplifted countless races, rebuilt entire civilizations, and remade the process of galactic history. all through a simple concept: gainful employment.